Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Thursday afternoon. We got a lot of stuff we're going to talk about, including farmers and swing state women, not related. All against Trump. Interesting. Then we've got the ICE raids, heartbreaking photos of the aftermath of the ICE raids in Mississippi. Then we have why Donald Trump might pardon, or not pardon, but might commute the sentence of a corrupt Democrat. That's also very interesting. And then, of course, my thoughts on the Joe Rogan, Bernie Sanders appearance. So, lots of fun. We'll talk about this stuff. Should be very interesting. Okay. Before we get into it, so for one, I want to ask you guys to please like and share the stream. So very, very helpful. Secondly, so I've been doing a lot of, I've been talking a lot about demonetization, right? So we've been getting hit especially hard as of recently. Yesterday I tried to kind of make the show something that wouldn't get demonetized. What happened? Was I successful? No. And apparently I have an issue with... I actually was supposed to get rid of that audible hum. So I don't know... That's weird because what I was supposed to do was get... You know what? Let me switch something around. I will do that. So just give me a minute and let me see what I can do. All right, so we're back. So here's the funny thing, right? So I bought something to get rid of hum. It made the hum worse. So live troubleshooting, right? So apparently this thing don't work. Let's move on. Let's get to the show. That was $50, by the way, and I'm really, really irritated. So anyway, let's kind of move on. Talk about how YouTube is terrible. Yeah, hum's gone. Thank you. So anyway, like I said, we've been doing videos and we've been getting demonetized. So was yesterday's show? The show that I was supposed to not get demonetized at all. What happened? 3 out of 5 videos instantly demonetized. I was like, no, wait a minute. So apparently I cannot mention anywhere, even if it's just the name of the city where a tragedy happened. I cannot mention that at all, or my channel gets, or not my channel, but my videos end up getting demonetized. No mention of anything that's still, I mean, it's complete and utter insanity. So I don't know. Basically, again, YouTube has basically admitted that you can't talk about any sort of tragedy. Nothing. Or else you risk losing your monetization status on that specific video. So what irritates me, what irks me about that, is that here you have those same advertisers that advertise on MSNBC who advertise on CNN, right? So they can do that. They can advertise all day. And the pundits on MSNBC, they can talk about these issues, not a problem. But the difference is, it's old media, it's television. So we know they're fine. Well, we're fine. But yet, when we have, and I send all my videos to review, right, for YouTube. So when that happens, it still gets demonetized because, you're talking about a sensitive issue, you're talking about a recent tragedy. Well, that's called being news. So that's the problem, is YouTube does not want anyone doing news or politics or anything. They want old media to continue doing news and politics, and that's what the advertisers want. So that's the problem here. And so I figured out, well, maybe it's not I'm not the first one probably to figure this out. But that's why I'm getting demonetized so much. So anyway, all right. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating. Okay. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to get into the channel, get into some of the stories here, and yeah, no kidding. There's another thing that YouTube is doing, by the way, too, is they demonetize videos that have bad comments. I mean, come on. So I can understand, like, maybe you're talking about something that's super controversial in your video, right? But then if somebody makes a comment that is, but have you seen YouTube's comment section? They demonetize you because of the comments some people make. That's what they're doing too. Or at least that's what they're looking at doing. So YouTube is an absolute mess. Yeah. So patreon.com/TYTNation. That's all I'm saying. Patreon.com/TYTNation. We're going to need, we're going to need everybody that can to sign up and help. All right. If we're going to beat this ridiculous demonetization. All right. Anyway. Now let's get to the stories. Okay. Now, women in swing states have about had it with President Donald Trump. Now, the Wall Street Journal had went and talked to some of these women in key battleground states and found that many of them can no longer stand Donald Trump and his rhetoric. And, of course, are no longer swayed, and this is what's interesting, by his claims of a strong economy. So, again, super interesting, right? Now, for me, look, for the regular person, I should say, the economy, it's kind of humming along, and people on TV say it's great, and I don't really watch a whole lot of TV because I'm busy working 2 jobs, whatever. But they say it's great. Okay, whatever. Great. Now, I don't think it's great. I think the economy has been running on a sugar high, thanks to the tax cuts for the rich, and basically it's a house of cards. It's going to fall over at some point. Most of the tax cuts, 83% of them went to the wealthiest Americans, to the top 1%. So that's a big problem for the economy because whenever you make something that is too top heavy, what does it do? It falls over, right? So the whole claims of, we got the strongest economy ever. No, it's ridiculous and completely wrong. It's an absolute lie. And while it is decent for some people, there is a large amount of Americans that are not feeling any sort of positivity about the economy. So anyway, now, let's go to some of the responses from some of these women who talked to the Wall Street Journal. So now, Patricia, right? And that's her, Patricia Wigman, right? That's her name. Now, she voted for Donald Trump in 2016, right? So she was on the Trump train. Here's what she said. Quote, he shouldn't be tweeting, and he shouldn't be opening his mouth. Why not, Patricia? What, is it because terrible things happen to come out of his mouth every time he opens it? Either something terrible or incredibly stupid? Could that be the reason? But wait a minute, I thought that's why conservatives liked him. He says what's on his mind. You remember that? Oh, he's not PC. He says what we're thinking. Well, then why would you want him to shut up? Oh, it's maybe because what you're thinking is actually kind of terrible, and turns out people don't like it. Again, do you remember the people who loved him because he's not PC, he's against PC culture? Oh, well, it appears their regrets are strong, right? So now, here's another person. I'm sorry. One more quote here from Ms. Wigman. She says, quote, there has to be someone better. Well, not on the Republican side. No. Now, on the Democratic side, there is somebody who's better. His name's Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders would destroy Donald Trump in a general election. There's more. Lori Walker, who's a Virginia resident and 2016 Trump voter, she gave the president credit for presiding over a strong economy, but added that, quote, everything else is terrible. So now let me kind of remind you that the president should not get all the blame, nor should they get all the praise for a good economy. Yes, the president may preside over a decent economy, but you also have to remember that it's Congress that makes a lot of the rules, right? In fact, Congress passes laws. And look, the Congress, for a short time, was basically controlled by Republicans. Now, before that, President Obama, under his watch, again, he was presiding over the economy. There were things that they did did after the Great Recession that helped pick up the economy. Now, there was also a lot of things that they didn't do that they should have. Well, they bailed out Wall Street, they bailed out the auto industry, but they didn't bail out Main Street. They didn't bail out people that were suffering from the foreclosure crisis, et cetera, right? So a lot of that sets the stage for a lot of the economic problems that people are feeling today, and we're feeling back in 2016. So there's that, right? So now, here's the thing, and this is the trick, right? So now, Republicans, here's what Republicans do. Massive spending. They do massive spending, and they do tax cuts. Now, the effect of that, of course, is that there is a stimulation of the economy for a short time. But at the same time, it runs up massive deficits. Now, Republicans, they say one thing, they do another. They love running up deficits. They don't care. They love to spend taxpayer money. And they do. They usually do it on the military or their contractor buddies, et cetera, right? And then, of course, giant tax cuts and corporate welfare. So now they do that until the Democrat comes into office or into power. Then they scream and howl and cry about the deficit until the Democrat decides, okay, the thing that we have to do is if we've got to do spending cuts. We want to be good stewards of the economy, so what we have to do is we're spending too much, et cetera. We have too much debt, and that poses apparently a long-term problem for them. Now, they do the spending cuts. What do the spending cuts do? They slow the economy because there's less money being put into the economy. And then Republicans will say, look at that, Democrats, you suck with the economy, dude. Vote for a Republican because we'll make the economy much, much better because look at what's going on under the Democrats. Every Democrat over the past, few decades has fallen into that ridiculous trap where, we have to be the responsible ones after Republicans screw up the economy, mess things up, create giant debts and deficits. Well, we got to fix it. We got to rein it in. And, of course, they do the cuts. And then everybody's like, well, why is the economy bad? Well, why is everything slowing down? Well, I guess it's because Democrats are terrible with the economy. Now, the other effect of this, of course, is that this has the effect of allowing us to not go forward at all with any sort of progressive legislation. Medicare for all, Green New Deal, expanding Social Security. Why? Because Democrats, who either fell into the trap or are paid by special interests, they say, well, look, we got a huge national debt. We got to do something about it. We got to put, as Obama did, Social Security on the table. I mean, we have to do it. We have to do it for the future. Let's change CPI. That was almost a grand bargain that Barack Obama was desperate to do. And the Republicans, lucky for us, were way too greedy in the amount of spending cuts that they wanted to do on social programs, right? So now Democrats, again, we've got this national debt. We've got big deficits. It turns out we can't afford anything big. And then Republicans say the same thing. And the biggest question that is asked is whenever somebody comes up with a new program or an expansion to an existing program, et cetera, they ask, well, how are you going to pay for it? That is the scam that has been run on us for decades. Now, here's the thing. It used to be the Democrats didn't care, right? They actually cared about doing good policy, right? You think Lyndon Johnson gave a crap about spending and debts and deficits or about what Republicans said when he created Medicare? No. Look, we need bold progressives to break us out of this ridiculous cycle so they can actually do things that are popular with the American people. Again, every single program that Bernie Sanders talks about is incredibly, deeply popular, right? Has majority support. So nothing he's proposed is out of step with the American public, right? Whereas, of course, whatever Republicans say, tax cuts for the rich, et cetera, and deregulation, it is deeply unpopular. Nobody out there is saying, hey, it would be a great idea? Let's give corporations more tax cuts. No, they hate that idea, the American public does. But why do you think it never gets done? Because of this scam, this trick, and then, of course, corporations have captured the government. And that's the other reason. But let's go back to Trump and his economy, right? Well, not just back to the economy, actually, but Donald Trump himself. Michigan resident Daniel Todd told the Journal that she, quote, she feels sickened by the way that Trump has treated migrant children who've been separated from their parents. And here's her quote. As a mom, what do you do when your children are taken away? We need to put humanity back into the conversation. Okay. Now, I don't know if she was a Donald Trump voter or not. To me, it doesn't sound like it. But she's right. I mean, we do need to put some humanity back into the situation. I mean, look, a man who was of Middle Eastern descent, right? Now, he died after being deported to Iraq. Well, now, wait a minute. The man never lived there. He didn't speak Arabic. He didn't speak the language. And was from Detroit. He also had type 1 diabetes, right? So he gets deported to a country of where he's not from. He has no family. no friends, no life there, doesn't even speak the language, and has type 1 diabetes. Of course, he died. He died. That's the effect of what ICE is doing right now, right? Another effect, you have the ICE raids that just happened that have split apart families. You have kids that came home to empty houses or locked out of their own houses because their parents had been, arrested by immigration and customs enforcement, right? So you want to talk about the lack of humanity? Yes, there is a definite lack of humanity in this administration. But I have to stress that a lot of Trump voters, that's exactly what they voted for. This is like eating tons of candy, these responses, and then getting a stomachache after you eat the candy. What's the matter? It's what you wanted. It's what you voted for. Why aren't you happy with it? I mean, don't be shocked that somebody you voted for is doing exactly what he told you he's going to do on immigration and on other things, on the economy. He said that's what he was going to do, and now he's doing it. When people show you who they really are, then maybe, I don't know, maybe you should believe them. Okay. Moving on. Now, President Trump's trade dispute with China continues to infuriate farmers in the Midwest. Now, China had just recently announced that it will stop all U.S. agricultural imports from the United States. So now most of the soybeans grown in the Midwest were sold to China. China says, you know what? You're going to put tariffs on us, then we're going to retaliate, and we're just not going to buy as much of your goods. And since Trump decided he was going to ramp up the tariffs against China, that they decided, well, we're just not going to buy from the United States at all. Now, that's, of course, a gigantic disaster for these farmers of soybeans who are already having a really difficult time, or were having a really difficult time, despite being bailed out but to the tune of $28 billion. Now, what's the Trump administration's response? Well, apparently one official decided to make jokes. I kid you not. Bloomberg News has reported that there was a meeting between farmers and Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue on Wednesday. And apparently this meeting, by all counts, did not go well. Gary Wordish, president of the Minnesota Farmers Union, went off on Perdue, calling out the administration for causing, quote, devastating damage not only to rural communities. Now, he also trashed Trump's $28 billion bailout by saying, quote, the public already views it as a welfare program or a bailout. Well, we're not wrong. That is a bailout. It's literal socialism, which is funny. They are propping up this industry because they literally took away the customers for that industry. He did it with his own terrible trade policies. It turns out that when you do tariffs, trade disputes with China are not fun and they are not easy to win. Okay? It turns out we had actually a lot more to lose than China. Who would have known? Oh, right. Everybody knows. Now, you don't think that currency manipulators, by the way, which China does, would not manipulate their currency to hurt America? That's exactly what they did. Congratulations. Well done. So, look, anyway, as you can imagine, there was a lot of high emotions during this meeting. So, what Perdue tried to do is lighten the mood. Now, how did he do that? By saying this. He said, what do you call two farmers in a basement? A wine cellar. Now, you can imagine that joke did not go over well. In fact, that's the joke, drew overwhelming boos from the crowd. Oh, Sonny, read the room. Oh, you're in a room with a bunch of farmers, and then you decided to make a joke about them being whiners. Yeah. Okay. Well, it gets worse. Brian Tallman serves as president of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association, said that Trump's claim that farmers are doing great was an absolute lie. In fact, he said, "We are not starting to do great again. We are starting to go down very quickly." Not only that, but American Soybean Association's Joe Schroers explained that they're in real danger of losing long term because of Trump's trade dispute with China. To which Purdue had responded with this: "If your solution is to forget what China has done and sell and trade with them anyway with cheating, then I just fundamentally disagree with you." So, hey man, I don't care that you're losing your customer, your biggest customer. Sad day. We think China's doing things that are unfair. Now, here's the thing. Does China do things that are unfair? Absolutely. Look, they do IP theft, currency manipulation. They've done steel and aluminum dumping. Where they, take a lot of steel and aluminum and they bring it to the United States for a very, very low price. Now, that happens to hurt American steel manufacturers, right? So, look, that's a lot of problems, right? And yes, we do need to do something about it. But are tariffs the answer? Well, if you're still asking that, then you haven't been paying attention to what's going on. Because apparently tariffs are not the answer to this. And see, what goes on when you put tariffs is that it's not China that pays the tariffs. It's not these Chinese companies. It's American companies. It's American consumers. It's essentially a tax on American consumers. Now, that can be good depending on the circumstance, or it could be bad depending on the circumstance. Now, if the whole idea is to boost our manufacturing base for certain subject or for certain things, okay, so you do something very, very specific in the tariff, right, to help boost our trade or our manufacturing base or whatever, right, our certain business aspect. What Donald Trump has done is he's put a blanket tariff on everything except for his daughter Ivanka Trump's goods. That is not an accident, by the way. So now the other problem with tariffs is that if you depend on, first of all, exporting a big section of a sector of the economy, as soybeans and agricultural products are, in fact, I think over 75% of our U.S. agricultural products went to China. So if you endanger that with tariffs, well, that's a big problem, right? Or if you have that situation, a smart person would not endanger that with tariffs. And so what they did, unfortunately, is that's exactly what the administration had done. They endangered it, they put tariffs on, and China said, okay, all right, you want to mess with us? We'll definitely mess with you. And that's unfortunately what happened. They chose not to do business with the United States. And that presents a gigantic problem for the farmers who have spent decades cultivating these trade relationships. China is an enormous market, and there has to be a better way to encourage the Chinese to be more fair and to crack down on some of their terrible trade practices. But there's got to also be a way to do it without destroying our own agricultural sector in the process. And unfortunately, Donald Trump's already done that. Because at the end of the day, we are actually far more hurt than they are. And this administration, well, for one, they don't want to admit it. Two, they don't want to empathize with it. And three, they don't really care. All their solution is throwing more taxpayer money at this problem, at a problem that they created. And yes, you could say, well, Donald Trump goes and creates a problem, and then he goes and solves it, and then tries to take the credit. Except in this case, you can't solve this problem. Most of China now gets their soybeans from other countries. You cannot just undo that. You can't just change that. So these farmers will be hurt for decades to come. That's what's going on here. And so, look, giving them, bailouts and socialism, obviously not the answer. The answer is getting them to have a good, fair trading partner in the world. And unfortunately, President Trump does not care at all about doing that. And even if he did care, he doesn't know how, because he's not a stable genius and he's not a smart person. Okay. All right, moving. All right. So, some outrage. Now, roughly 600 immigration officials raided a number of food processing plants throughout the state of Mississippi on Wednesday. They arrested nearly 700 employees, many of them Latinos, in what was a massive ICE raid on undocumented immigrants. So now, there's the aftermath, of course, and some reporters have captured some images of this aftermath, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. Now, you have children, of course, coming home to empty houses after school, or sometimes their houses are even locked up, after their parents were arrested and taken to facilities. WJTV reporter Alex Love took some of these photos, and I'm going to show them to you here, and wrote on Twitter that the Guardians were taken by immigration officials to a military hangar for processing. He said, many are left scared and crying after coming home from school and being locked out without their parents. Now, ICE director, this is ICE acting director Matthew Albans, had told the Associated Press earlier that on Wednesday that the raids were a, quote, long-term operation and, quote, racially neutral. Oh, really? Racially neutral. So I wonder how many of the white Europeans that have overstayed their visas just got arrested. I wonder how many wealthier white Europeans who are undocumented immigrants, or who were undocumented immigrants, Melania Trump, were targeted by some of these raids. We all know it's not racially neutral. We know who they're targeting. They're targeting Latinos. Now, the other thing is about this is a long-term operation, which means there are more of these raids planned. Disastrous. Now, the Washington Post reported that the raids were part of an investigation into illegal employment in the state, specifically at agricultural processing plants. So in this case, it's very rare, but in this case, they actually did also go after the company and the employers. Nonetheless, that doesn't make this any better. So what's ironic about this is that in going after these undocumented immigrants at these processing plants, well, for one, they're going after people who work and pay taxes, right? Now, they're not citizens of the country, but they still pay state and local tax, and federal taxes as well that are taken out of their paychecks. So, and I'm not saying that there doesn't exist, jobs in which people get paid under the table, but I don't think this was that kind of operation. And number two, you also hurt the agricultural sector, which already has a preponderance of mostly unskilled immigrant labor, which means there's not going to be many Americans that are going to want to take those jobs. So congratulations, you've also just hurt a small business and hurt an entire, sector of the economy, which means you're going to end up having prices for these products go up. Congratulations. So again, they go after the ones who work and pay taxes. And the question is, does that disincentivize undocumented immigrants from working and paying taxes? I think it would. And that's the end result. Now, Arahita, who was a U.S. citizen, who was featured in one of these videos that were shown about the raid, said, I've been working at that plant for 19 years. We came here to work, and the agents are not looking for criminals. They're looking for work sites for people who came to this country to work, who came to fight for their family. Again, they're not going after the bad hombres. They're not going after the criminals. They're going after people going to work. who just happen to be here without documentation. Now, Donald Trump and the Republicans, they promised. They're like, oh, no, we're going to go after the criminal aliens. We're going to have to go to the gang members, to MS-13, the criminal aliens. We're going to crack down on them. Does this look like criminal aliens? No, they're going after all undocumented immigrants, whether you're committed a crime or not. To them, there are no good undocumented immigrants. So that's why they don't have a problem at all at ripping these families apart. And I want to show you a couple of pictures here of the aftermath. All right. So here's one. So obviously, there's a child crying after one of the raids. That's sad and / disastrous. And you have another one. This is at a gym that was set up to house some of these children who have just lost their parents. They have food, but a lot of these kids, understandably, they don't want to eat. They don't want to do anything. They want to be reunited with their parents. So, I mean, that's just a couple of the images that have come out about this. And you know, it's super heartbreaking. Now, Alex Love, who tweeted this out, along with some of the pictures and some video, he said, in Forest, Mississippi, where one of the ICE raids happened, nearby children of those who were arrested are left alone in the streets crying for help. Strangers and neighbors are taking them to a local gym to be put up for the night. So I want to be clear, right, that this points out that it wasn't ICE that had something set up for these children, someplace for them to go because they no longer had their parents. No, they just arrested the parents and they said, okay, now we're going to go. And that's it. Well, what do you do with the children? What's going to happen with the children? So it came to volunteers and people who are members of the community to care for these children. According to local reports, many children do not have a loved one or family friend to go home to. Some had walked home from school but were locked out because their parents were detained in the raid. There was food, Love reported, but most children are still devastated and crying for their parents and cannot eat. This is what we're doing. Now, if you're okay with this, then you're a monster. Plain and simple. Now, I want to give you a quote here from ICE Southern Region Communications Director Brian Cox. Now, he said this, quote, "What I can say is that every law enforcement agency in the nation arrests persons who may be parents whose persons commit arrestable offenses. And this agency has taken and is continuing to take extensive steps to take special care of situations." Well, good job on this one, right? Cox said the detainees were advised to let ICE officers know if they had any children who were at school or childcare and needed to be picked up. Because the first thing you want to do if you're an undocumented parent is subject your children to ICE agents. That's exactly what you want to do, right? I mean, knowing how children in cages at the border are being treated at this very moment. So, is it a case of that, ICE didn't care, or that these parents didn't tell these agents about their kids? I have no way of knowing. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were both situations that had happened. So, now, he also said the detainees were allowed to use cell phones and make arrangements for the care of their children or other dependents, and that officials were instructed to contact nearby schools to inform them of their operation. How nice of you. Oh, you gave them a cell phone so that they can call their kids and say, Mommy and Daddy are getting arrested, for crossing the border, so you're on your own, kids. Sorry, we can't do anything for you. Look, I don't care that these people cross the border illegally. I don't care. I don't give a crap. Back before Trump, crossing the border was a misdemeanor. Now it's a felony. Now it's a full-on criminal offense. And that's because of Donald Trump. So now, of course, that leads to Republicans saying, well, hey, look, man, and people who support this, hey, I'm just following the law. Maybe they should have followed the law and not crossed over illegally. How many of those same people break the law all the time? Speeding. Yeah, you're breaking the law. You're breaking the law, right? No, these people are not law and order. They are cruelty for cruelty's sake. They are in favor of this. They love this because they think, I get to look down on someone else. I get to look down on the other. I don't want those people in my country. No, no, no. This country is for white people only. So, and you know what? I hate the defense of, hey, man, look, we're just following the law, right? ICE agents included, we're just executing the law. It's a bad law. It's a bad law. And you shouldn't be following it. But here's the thing. Saying that it's, oh, no, it's the law, so we're just going to follow the law, right? That's what all bad people throughout all the terrible times in history have said. Oh, we're just following the law. That's it. Hey, Jewish people, you're not allowed in here. You know what? It's the law. Sorry. Now, I know, of course, heads just exploded, right? Now, wait a minute. How dare you make that comparison? This is not what we're doing. No, we are doing the same thing. We are doing the same thing. Now, I'm not saying that they started with death camps. No, that's not happening, right? But you know how it started? With calling Jewish people dirty, diseased, saying that we need to get them out of our country, right? And then deporting them, arresting them, putting them in camps. What do you think we're doing? This is a very long and very dark path that we have been taken on in this country. And we need to stop it before it is too late. Because once it's too late, it's too late. Okay. All right. Moving on. Now, some of you might remember Rod Blagojevich. He is the ex-governor of Illinois. Now, you might also remember that he went to prison for trying to trade President Obama's empty Senate seat for his own personal gain. So he's one of the rare instances of somebody who was deeply, deeply corrupt, who actually got punished for his corruption. So now why do I bring him up? Well, it's because Donald Trump is in favor of commuting his sentence. So now it's being reported that Trump, and it was reported up to last year, that he's been strongly considering a commutation of Blagojevich's remaining 14-year prison sentence. He was actually sentenced to about 18 years in prison for, trying to cash in on basically that Senate seat, doing corruption. And Donald Trump says, you know what? That is so unfair. In fact, let me give you this quote from him. He said, quote, I thought he was treated unbelievably unfairly. Now, who's he said that against? Or said that about? He's also said it about, Paul Manafort. So, Michael Flynn. So you can see the kind of people that he says it about, right? They've been treated very unfairly, right? So he said he was given close to 18 years in prison, and a lot of people thought it was unfair, like a lot of other things. What? And it was the same gang, the Comey gang, and all these sleazebags that did it. And his name is Rod Blagojevich, and I'm thinking about commuting his sentence. Comey gang. Well, here he is, basically trying to undo what Comey had done, because he hates Comey, of course. So now, you might think that, hey, man, it sounds like Donald Trump's got an idea. I mean, he's all about commuting people's sentences, and he's commuted some good sentences, right? Well, that's actually not what Trump had done. But he had commuted the sentence of, and I forget her name now, but an African-American woman that was put in prison unfairly. So now, some of the stuff that he's done on that front, on not social justice, but criminal justice has actually been not too bad. But I also think it was a little self-serving, right? So now you would think it was Trump's idea, but in reality, like a lot of the criminal justice measures, it's actually floated by Jared Kushner. Kushner had told President Trump that pardoning Blagojevich would appeal to Democrats, according to one source. He also said that, or other advisors, I should say, told Trump that a pardon would be unwise, but a commutation would be received a lot better. So now, this is really telling, right? So now Kushner comes to Trump and says, you should commute this guy's sentence because he's a Democrat, and the Democrats will be in favor of it. This is how you can appeal to Democrats. That's really weird because Blagojevich is deeply corrupt. Now, me, as a progressive, why would I at all like the idea of commuting the sentence of a corrupt Democrat who tried to literally cash in on corruption? It blows my mind, right? Now, then again, maybe it's popular in parts of Chicago. There are some people, African Americans in certain districts in Chicago, that are like, no, I love Rod Blagojevich. What are you talking about? I think he was treated very unfairly. But for me, I don't care about him. He's not only part of the establishment, but he's also a criminal. So now here's my speculation, right? So now maybe Trump thinks if I commit a Democrat, then maybe the Democrats will let me commute one of my buddies. Somebody like Michael Flynn or Paul Manafort. Now Trump, we know this, he's transactional, right? So he thinks if I do something for you, well, then you're going to do something for me. Now, in this case, I let your guy go, your corrupt guy, because he only sees things in binary, Republican, Democrat, right? And then if I let him go and commute his sentence, then you will let me commute one of my guys that helped me with, or that were, part of the Russia investigation. That is my speculation, right? And so, look, if you want to argue, by the way, as some establishment Democrats are making this argument that putting him in prison for 18 years is too harsh, well, look, okay, that's one argument. I disagree with that. He's actually one of the few corrupt officials to actually be punished for that, and I want to see it stand. But that's me. That's my bias, and maybe I'm a little too harsh. That's up for you to decide. But for Kushner's reasoning, to me, it seems ridiculous. But again, you have Blagojevich, who's part of the Democratic establishment. You even have Eric Holder coming out. The guy who put him away during the Obama administration was like, maybe we did treat him a little too harshly. Uh-oh. Now you have members of the Democratic establishment that are agreeing with Donald Trump to let a criminal go. Again, a corrupt criminal. So maybe they're right. Maybe it will appeal to some Democrats. I don't know. But my thought is that Trump's probably doing this because he wants to protect all his criminal friends and allow them to get away with what they did because he himself is a criminal. Just my 2 cents. Okay. All right. Moving on. Let's go to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is the host of the podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. I think some of you might have heard of it, but those of you who aren't or who haven't, that's basically what he is. He's what he does, and he has a lot of different people on his podcast, right? So now recently, Rogan hosted Senator and presidential candidate Bernie Sanders on his podcast. Now, in this discussion, they talked about a lot of different things. Universal health care, gun control, debate format, money in politics, and yes, he even talked about aliens, which I found fascinating. So now, I think it was a really good discussion. I listened to it last night, the whole hour. I suggest everyone else take a listen to it because actually it was really good. And because it was good, it actually got an incredibly good reception on social media and on YouTube, surprisingly. And this is interesting considering that a lot of his audience, yes, they do kind of go across the political spectrum, but it does tend to tilt to the right, lean to the right just a little bit. And to see even right wingers, people who are his audience, have a positive reception of Bernie Sanders is actually really interesting. Nonetheless, Rogan, like I said, has gotten a lot of praise for having Bernie Sanders on, and so is Bernie Sanders for going on his program. In fact, here you have Emma Vigeland, right? Now, Emma Vigeland is TYT's own correspondent for TYT. She said, such a smart move by Bernie Sanders' team to have him go on Joe Rogan. Traditional political types might scoff at it, and believe me, they have. But Rogan's reach to independents, conservatives, and liberals is enormous. He's a humanizing, fascinating interviewer, even if I don't always agree with him. And I think that's a perfect take, right? Rogan, look, he says things that I agree with. He says things that I disagree with. Some people say that he's a gateway to the alt-right. He has a lot of terrible people on, and sometimes doesn't necessarily challenge them, or sometimes agrees with them, but also sometimes disagrees with them. Like, for example, when he talked about immigration. And so, look, he's kind of a mixed bag, right? But you can't deny that he's also had some really awesome people on his show that he has had really good conversations with. Let me give you a couple of examples. Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, Cornel West, and now, of course, Senator Bernie Sanders. And during these discussions, they are actually having substantive, interesting discussions. Now, one of the best parts, by the way, is near the beginning when Bernie Sanders was talking about the debate format. He said that, in effect, this whole debate format, like, on the CNN debates that they recently had, they were a bit dehumanizing, and they turned a debate into a game of basically who can come up with the best soundbite. Now, that's not conducive to making good substantive policy arguments. You can't do that in 12 seconds. So that's a perfectly good point, and it's an excellent, valid point, and it actually makes the case that the debate formats are broken, and not only that, but that the Democratic field is way too large. So there are some issues with that, right? So now in the debate format, like I said, I would rather have a long-form, hour-long discussion and watch that than watch a debate where everybody's talking over each other, where you have the moderators that are talking over people that are giving, terrible framing on some of these questions, even framing from the pharmaceutical industry that happened. This was also mentioned on the podcast. And so I would rather have that hour-long free-flowing discussion than that. Because I think that hurts discourse. That actually hurts the candidates in the long run. And it makes it all about who can trap somebody in a gotcha question or a soundbite, which is why we saw so much, about Kamala Harris getting Bernie Sanders and then Tulsi Gabbard getting Kamala Harris. And so there's that. Now, this, of course, led to a lot of positive responses on their YouTube comment section, which always surprises me because YouTube comment sections can be pretty terrible. Now, one YouTube user wrote this, quote, "All politics aside, it's incredible that this style of interview happened. Hats off to Bernie for coming on the show. It was nice to hear what he actually thinks without talking heads interrupting." Yes. Agreed. I couldn't agree more. Now, another YouTube user wrote this. You can disagree with this man, fine. I do too on several issues, and that's fine. But I have to respect a presidential candidate that will sit down at this length and answer the questions he's getting asked. A lot harder to say nothing for 1.5 hours than it is for 45 seconds. And again, that's why I think this was a great idea. He got to expose millions of listeners. I think, 3 million, 4 million views now? He got to expose all these people to Bernie Sanders' ideas. Now, that is not what people on TV's interpretation of his ideas are, or what you see more often, misrepresentations and falsehoods spread by political pundits who, quote unquote, analyze Bernie Sanders and his policy proposals. No, you get to actually hear it from him himself. And hearing him explain what he wants to do, how he's going to do it, there is some real value there. Now, that said, I didn't like some of Joe's framing. I think he comes at a little bit from a more slightly right-wing perspective, and that's fine. I can disagree with that, but the questions actually were really good. It was a very solid interview. Good questions, excellent answers. One of the answers that I didn't like from Bernie Sanders, to be 100% honest, is when he was asked about the legalization of all drugs, and he wasn't there. And I think, well, look at what Portugal did, right? They had a lot of success with legalization of all drugs. Use of these drugs actually went down, and deaths from these drugs went way down. And in this interview, we did get to hear him explain why he has that position, and so you can understand, right? And not only that, but he got to explain why he holds all these different positions. And like I keep saying, it's not radical. These positions are not radical. A majority of the country actually agrees that these are mainstream practical ideas. Rogan even said during the interview that his ideas don't seem as radical as mainstream news tends to portray them. So, look, I don't want to just tell you about it. I suggest that you give it a listen. It's just over an hour. It's really good. I recommend it. But let me tell you about my favorite part, right? So that came at the end of the show where Rogan was asking Sanders about aliens, about UFOs. Specifically asking, hey, if you're president, will you tell us about the UFOs? Will you tell us about the aliens? Now, anybody who knows me knows that I love that question. I love that topic. That is my burning question. Literally. Are there the aliens? Tell me about the aliens. Have we been in contact? So that's interesting. And you'll have to tune in to, of course, see his answer. But overall, let me just end it by saying that I way prefer this format over the so-called debate format, and I hope Bernie Sanders does more of these sit-down, long-form interviews. I think it's great that he's doing it, and I also, hope that more people will watch them to really get more of a sense of who he is. And I also think that, Rogan should have other politicians on, or every politician on, have Kamala Harris, have her explain her situation. Tulsi, he might have already had Tulsi Gabbard, but I'm not entirely sure. Have Beto O'Rourke, right? So give all of these candidates a chance to explain their positions so that we get to know them and we get to know why they are, the way they are, why they feel certain ways on certain positions. Hell, I'd even watch one on John Delaney. Just because, not because I find John Delaney interesting, but I do want to know why he, is where he is. And also, I want to see just what kind of lame way he will try to defend his stances on us not having anything. But I think most importantly, it's very important to go outside, to be able to go outside of the corporate mainstream media and to do these types of interviews and to have this information available. Give it a listen, give it a watch, and see what this is all about. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. I didn't have time for breaks, and I didn't have time for the consumer story because of our sound issues. But don't worry. We'll be back tomorrow. We also have, it will not be live, though, but I'm planning an interview with, well, I'm not going to spoil it, right? But it's about facial recognition software. So it's going to be an interesting interview. It's with Evan Greer. So I did just spoil it, didn't I? Damn it. But it's going to be a good interview. So we'll have that tomorrow, and I'll post it up later on Friday. So it should be a really fun interview and a fun show tomorrow. So please like and share the stream if you haven't already. And remember, love you guys, and change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you guys tomorrow.